Greetings, all you Jackson Jennets, and welcome to your daily dose of donkey with Ginger. It's your boy, the Viking Donkey, coming to you with some Steelers talk. And this week, it's going to be more so AFC North talk, as we're going to do a recap of the other three AFC teams, some big losses that each team has got, and some big additions they brought in. We won't cover their draft class, because that might be covered somewhere else, and it might have already been covered. But let's break into it. Who should we start with other than, let's do alphabetical order. So the Baltimore Ravens. We'll go ahead and start with losses from the teams and then new additions they have. Obviously, some big losses, and these are guys who have signed elsewhere, so pending free agents on teams such as guys like Brandon Williams or Deontay Freeman, Latavius Murray for the Ravens won't be mentioned, but Miles Boykin got claimed by the Steelers off of waivers. And they lost two other receivers here in Baltimore. That'd be Marquise Brown, Hollywood Brown. He got traded to the Cardinals, as everybody knows. Maybe it'll work out for him. Sammy Watkins went and signed with the Packers. Offensive side, Bradley Bozeman, also their center, signed with the Carolina Panthers. Big Al Villanueva, good Steeler man, retired. They lost some guys on the defensive side, too, who put in some decent time for him. I mean, Justin Ellis went to the Giants. Anthony Averett went to the Raiders. Trayvon Young signed with the Bears. And Deshaun Elliott went to the Lions. But those are, to me, the big losses for the Ravens, clearly leaving some weaknesses there. What about additions, though? Who did the Baltimore Ravens bring in? Well, they signed in a running back in Mike Davis, brought back Patrick Ricard. They brought in Morgan Moses, a good offensive tackle. Brought in Michael Pierce, a guy who's going to fit in on that defensive line pretty well for them. They signed Brent Urban, depth type of defensive lineman out there. And they brought in Kyle Fuller, who's had good years, had bad years. Who knows which one they're going to get out of him. And then their big free agent signing was safety Marcus Williams. As you can see, they really tried to retool that secondary, bringing in Kyle Fuller, Marcus Williams. Not a whole lot of help to the offensive side, though, and it makes you wonder. The receiving corps struggled last year, and it looks to be weaker on paper this year. How's that going to work out for Baltimore, especially with a quarterback who's not the greatest at throwing the ball right now, Lamar Jackson, but is one hell of a playmaker? Retooling that secondary that struggled a lot. Keeping guys like Calais Campbell as well, trying to keep that front that can bring pressure. Hoping a big step out of Oweh this year. And we'll see what happens for the Ravens, but all in all, I feel like their roster transition in the offseason was neither up nor down. It just seemed to be very stable, I guess, for lack of a better term. So I would rate them as on par with what they were last year in terms of talent level. Let's get into the Cincinnati Bengals. Auden Tate, wide receiver, went to the Falcons. CJ Uzuma, their big tight end, signed with the Jets. Larry Ogunjobi signed with the Steelers. They also have a bunch of pending free agents out there who haven't re-signed, and some big ones are Quentin Spann and Riley Reiff on the offensive line. Those are guys who maybe they're looking to bring back, but were big helps to them last year. But really not a whole lot of losses for the Bengals in terms of big-time players out there. And we'll see if that matters at all. And in terms of signing people, I believe they brought in Hayden Hurst. They also signed Leo Collins. They signed Alex Kappa. That's a tight end in Hurst, the two offensive linemen in Collins and Kappa, who are both pretty good linemen. They brought in another sneaky good signing at center, I believe, is where Ted Karras plays. I believe that's where he played for the Patriots. Just seemed to be really good. Try to build a better offensive line than they had last year. They brought back a bunch of their people that people were wondering if they'd have the money to, like Eli Apple, Trey Flowers. Jesse Bates is on the franchise tag there. So when you look at a team like this for me in Cincinnati, you have to say, while there are some pending free agents that maybe they'd like to bring back, and losing two starters and a guy who was a good fourth receiver in Tate, I mean, honestly, with what they brought in compared to what they lost, you have to say that Bengals roster looks better than it did last year. And that's a scary thing to say when you consider that Bengals roster is the roster that made the Super Bowl last year. So who knows what we're looking at there, but I have to give definitely a plus rating to the Bengals based on their offseason moves. Now let's get into the Cleveland Browns. We have Case Keenum getting traded to the Bills, Baker Mayfield getting traded for the Panthers. That's a big story I didn't cover last week, but here I'm finally breaking it. Baker Mayfield finally gets out of there, goes to Carolina for a conditional 5th-round pick, and half the money getting paid by Cleveland. Talk about a huge win for the Panthers as they get now the 2 top quarterbacks in terms of interceptions thrown since Mayfield entered the league, I believe, in Darnold and Mayfield. But Mayfield, a little better winning record. Can't believe they gave up on him that easily, but I mean, to eat half his salary and only get a conditional 5th seems like you could have done better. Let's go. Other players that the Browns have lost. Rashad Higgins went to Carolina. Wide receiver really was a big loss there as they lose Jarvis Landry to the Saints. They also traded Odell Beckham Jr. from last year's starting team. Remember that? They cut Austin Hooper. He ends up going to the Titans. They trade Mack Wilson in a deal with the Patriots that brought in Chase Winovich, I believe is what it was. They traded back Troy Hill, the cornerback, who I thought was a good signing for him last year. They traded him back to the Rams, where he had big success. And they have a bunch of pending free agents that really could make a difference. I mean, you're looking at J.C. Treader, I believe, is their starting center, and Malik Jackson, big defensive tackle out there, still pending free agents. But a lot of losses going on here for the Cleveland Browns. The biggest of which might end up being their biggest acquisition if he gets suspended, and that's Deshaun Watson. They bring in Deshaun Watson, a huge trade, giving up a lot, guaranteeing him a lot of money. And who knows if he's going to play this year. I personally hope he gets to play at least a couple games, because otherwise the Browns get off with a very tiny cap hit next year because his money won't start being paid to him till next year. But if he plays this year, they take a huge cap hit next year because all that first-year money actually does get paid out, even though it wouldn't be the full first-year money. It'd be whatever prorated thing he gets. But the contract year would count, and that would be huge for the Steelers fans. So I'm hoping for somewhere in the 8 to 15 game suspension range for Deshaun Watson, because I feel that'll be the best deal for the Steelers. Clearly their biggest addition, but could also be their biggest loss depending on how the suspension part works out. Jacoby Brissett, another guy they signed in to be there, along with Josh Dobbs, I guess you could say, former Steeler, gets there. They signed Jakeem Grant. Don't know if that really moves the needle, wide receiver. Trade for Amari Cooper. A lot of money owed there for a guy who's a number 2. I'm sorry, Amari Cooper, you've never shown to me you're a number 1, and until you do, you're going to be a number 2. But it doesn't hurt to have good number 2s. They brought back a lot of their own guys out there, added a lineman in Ethan Pockets, and I don't know if he's going to be a big deal there. I'm trying to look through and remember if they had any big signings out there that weren't their own players. I mean, bringing back Clowney, Denzel Ward, Ronnie Harrison, that type of deal. Chris Hubbard, former Steeler. Guys that they brought back. I really don't feel that let's be honest here. The Browns could have moved the needle in the biggest way possible, because let's be honest, what they brought in wasn't much different than what they gave away outside of the quarterback position. If Deshaun Watson plays and wins more games and plays better than Baker Mayfield, then obviously their offseason is a huge win. If Deshaun Watson's suspended, then their offseason for this year at least is a huge loss, because not only do they not have Deshaun Watson, they no longer have Baker Mayfield. And say what you want, Baker Mayfield made the playoffs, has beat the Steelers in the playoffs, has done a lot of things for Cleveland that Cleveland hadn't had done before, but they just didn't like him and thought he was too immature. So the big question becomes, are the Browns a better team today than they were the start of last year? And the answer to that question is, does Deshaun Watson play? And does he play well after a long layoff? If the answer to either of those questions is no, then their offseason is a huge loss because Baker Mayfield went somewhere else. I guess you could also say, does Baker Mayfield go to Carolina and make Carolina better than Cleveland? That's going to be a fun, interesting thing to see. I don't know what to tell you. I don't know how it's going to work out. But all in all, when I look at the AFC North, the only team I can firmly say I believe has improved their roster from the start of last year to right now is the Cincinnati Bengals. And I guess you could say that's a scary thing for the Steelers, because the Bengals are a really good team, and they showed that last year making the Super Bowl. You could also say, but do injuries account for anything here? Because let's be honest, the Ravens, so many injuries last year. If they stay healthy, who knows what that team looks like? So I expect them to, if they stay healthy, be a better team than they were last year. The Browns, like I said, I don't know. It all depends on Deshaun Watson. That's kind of a weird thing to do. Well, hopefully next week we have some more Steelers news to talk about, or we have some guests to bring in to give in some Steelers insights. Think the AFC North recap, we might do a little bit more into it. Maybe we'll do a dive into the draft picks and who's going to make an instant impact out of the four teams and who's going to have the biggest impact out of all the rookie draft people. Don't know. We'll see about that. But I guess it's time to get to our shout-outs. And guess since I watched the British Open today, I'll go ahead and give a shout-out to mullet-having Aussie Cameron Smith for winning the Open, as they like to call it, and becoming a champion. So just got to give a shout-out there. I know I've given 2 golf shout-outs in the off-season. It seems appropriate to me. That's why I keep doing it. So it's time to let you know I am the Viking Donkey. That's Viking_Donkey on Twitch and Twitter. Your daily dose of donkey with Ginger is the YouTube channel where you can catch all the content. Leave us a like, leave us a follow. Let us know what we're doing good, what we're doing bad. If there's something you would like to see, if there's some other team you'd like to see covered in depth. Because, hey, I'm always open to finding new stuff and looking in new stuff. Keep working on the power rankings, and hopefully I'll have a better power rankings this year to do, but I don't know. But I'm trying my best to update it and see if it can give us a little better results than it did, because more data you get, the more you learn, the better it should get, in theory, but I don't know. I hope it does. Anyway, Donk Nation, Steeler Nation, it's getting really close to real football time, so wave them if you got them. Here we go.